Good evening, everyone. Welcome to yet another podcast from Major Squad. Today, we're going to talk about Meteor, the main arrow in the quiver of Rafale, which everyone has been talking about. And for that, we have Mihir Shah here, who's a mechanical engineer by profession, but an aviation enthusiast. So, Mihir, welcome to the podcast, and please do educate us about the topic.
Thank you, Manik. It's very exciting to be on my very first podcast with Major Squad, or as we call it, a squad cast. So before we get into the specifics of the Meteor itself, and I know that the Rafale has been occupying so much news space these days. Everyone is speaking of the Rafale and the Meteor as a game changer that will defeat all of our enemies. Before we get into all of that, I think it is important to discuss how air combat at extended ranges, we call this beyond visual range or BVR air combat actually works. The popular understanding, it goes something like this. A plane sees a target with its radar. The plane launches a missile at the target. And suppose the missile has a stated range of 100 kilometers. So if the target is within 100 kilometers of the aircraft, it will be hit. If both planes launch at each other, the plane with the longer range missile wins. Very simple.
I'm sure it is not as simple as that. Would you like to, give it a little deeper thought and explain it a little further?
Absolutely. This was the popular understanding of extended range combat. It is nowhere near as simple. A BVR battle is very complicated. It's like a game of chess. It's got so many moving pieces and parts, and its outcome depends on several factors. So what I would like to do is take some time to discuss the 3 or 4 most important factors that matter in an air battle. The first is obviously the range of the missile itself. I'm not saying that is not important. It is important, but we sometimes tend to take it out of its context. The other 3 factors an outcome would depend on, or the 3 most important factors that the outcome would depend on, is your overall situational awareness, the geometry of the engagement, and your electronic warfare capabilities.
So, can you tell us why these things are important since you've listed them down? I mean, can we critically analyze them? Why each of that plays a very important role in the overall scenario?
Absolutely. So let us first talk about the missile's kinematic range. This is something that most people very intuitively understand. By using a better, more powerful missile or more sophisticated propulsion, your missile can cover a greater distance than the competition. Or it can manage its energy better such that once it is close to the target, we call this the terminal phase of the engagement, it has a higher chance of hitting the target than some other older missiles do. This is all advantageous. But it is important to remember that it is just one piece of the puzzle. So let's talk about some of the other things that matter. I would say one of the key aspects is situational awareness. So from the perspective of a command post, situational awareness is this catch-all term that defines how detailed and accurate your picture of the battlefield is. We don't call it battlefield these days, by the way. We call it battle space because we like using fancy words. So situational awareness is achieved through a host of systems. You've got airborne radars, you've got land-based radars, you've got passive electronic sensors that simply listen for signals in the air and try to find what assets the enemy has operating in the battle space. These sensors all feed into a centralized battle management system through a communications network. This battle management system, it processes the data, and what it does is it presents this data to the commander in a very coherent manner so that he can understand the air picture and he can make quick decisions. So situational awareness is what allows a commander to optimally position his own forces to launch operations while also taking care of or taking advantage of the enemy's weaknesses. Now, this is all a very theoretical discussion. I'll try to explain this through a hypothetical scenario or an example. Suppose there is a flight of, say, 2 fighter planes flying towards the east. They're on a combat air patrol. The enemy has an airborne radar. We call this airborne radar an AWACS. It has an airborne radar in the skies, and it is tracking this flight. Now, suppose that this enemy positions a group of fighters slightly north of this formation and at a higher altitude. They cannot be seen by these first two fighters because their radars are looking forwards. They're not looking sideways. The enemy fighters have one more advantage. Because their AWACS is tracking this flight, they don't need to turn on their own radars. So they don't set off any passive sensors within the flight of the first two aircraft, like a missile warning system or a radar warning receiver. So they are flying silent and essentially stealthy. Now, imagine that this first flight of first two aircraft, it lacks any form of support. There is no AWACS. There is no ground-based radar coverage for whatever reason. That would put the enemy in the perfect position to ambush these two fighters. It doesn't matter how good their own radars are because they're not looking at the fighters approaching from their right-hand side. It doesn't matter if their missiles have longer range because they don't even know they have to shoot at the enemy, leave alone calculate a firing solution. Those fighters have been caught in an inferior position, and regardless of the quality of their radars and missiles, they are in trouble.
Okay, great, Mihir. I mean, I understood that brilliantly, but tell us more about the engagement geometry here, because I think that's a critical piece of the whole puzzle. How aircrafts are engaging each other and what the battle space, as you like to call it now, looks like.
Okay, so like you say, it is a very critical piece of the puzzle, but it is also a very complicated topic. So let me do what I can to simplify it to the extent that it gets the point across. At a fundamental level, you have to understand that a missile is basically a projectile. It is an object that is thrown from a fighter plane at the enemy. I mean, yes, there are more nuances to this. It can fly under its own power for some duration. It can guide itself. This is all true. But at a fundamental level, it is no different from a ball that you throw towards someone. Now let's take this analogy a little further. Suppose I'm playing a game of dodgeball. I have to throw a ball at someone and try to hit them with that ball while the other person tries to dodge it. And I'm competing with, let's say, Shoaib Akhtar. He's the fastest bowler in the world. And he's playing against me, someone who has never played sport very seriously. So he's sure to win, right? He can stand a good distance away from me and he can throw balls happily at me all day long and stand a good chance of hitting me. But from the same distance, the balls that I throw towards him are not even going to reach him. He wins. But now I decide to tweak the rules a little bit. I decide that I am going to stand on the terrace of a two-story building and throw my ball off of that terrace towards Mr. Akhtar, who is standing on the ground. I'm not going to stop there. I'm also going to take a long run up. Think of how much energy that ball has now. It has the initial kinetic energy that my own run up is giving to it. Then, because it is starting at the top of a two-story building, it also has potential energy, which together implies that my ball will now be able to travel a great distance. On the other hand, Shoaib Akhtar has to throw the ball up the building. He has to throw it up by 2 stories. And according to my rules, he cannot take a run up. The most he can do is walk. So the outcome is that while now my ball can reach him from a great distance, despite Mihir Shah being much physically weaker and not into sport, his ball will travel much less. And I have the advantage in this game despite being fundamentally weaker and less trained. But let me complicate things even further for Shoaib Akhtar. I decide that every time he throws the ball at me, I'm going to run away from him. But when I throw towards the ball at him, I will run towards him and he has to walk in a straight line towards me. Those are my rules. Now, Relatively speaking, my throws will start going even further, and his will be even shorter because his throws have to catch up with a guy that is running away. At its very simplest, this is what extended range or BVR air combat looks like. And this is what I mean by engagement geometry. The relative position of the two fighters engaging in the battle, and also the relative bearing that they have with respect to each other. An aircraft that is flying at Mach 2 and firing missiles from high altitude will always have greater reach than one that is flying at subsonic speeds and at low altitude. It doesn't matter what the stated range of the missiles themselves is. Plus, if the first aircraft, the one that is at higher altitude and going at Mach 2, if it fires its missiles and turns away and runs away, it would be impossible for the second airplane to shoot a missile back at it from that low altitude and then hope to hit it first. It does not matter what the quoted range, or it matters very little what the quoted range of the missile is on paper. Favorable engagement geometry can give the inferior or supposedly inferior missile an advantage. And getting into a favorable position can also help the better missile increase its advantages even further.
Okay, that was really, in a very simplistic way, you made us understand something which is very complicated. So thanks for that. But there is a point that there are even more, like when you get into electronic warfare, there are loads of components that play a role into this. It is not simply an aircraft and its missile. So can you throw some light on that actually?
That is correct. Now, electronic warfare is a whole topic in itself, and I won't get into all of the nuances and details that go along with it, but I'll touch upon the most important points of electronic warfare, or what we would call the quality of your battlefield electronics. The first thing that matters here is how capable your fighter radar is. Look, it's very simple. A powerful radar can see further than a weak radar can. If it can spot the enemy at a greater range, it can fire off its missiles earlier, potentially, before the enemy can even spot it. Or a radar that is, whose data is processed by sophisticated algorithms in the backend, it can spot an enemy against things like ground clutter. Whereas an older radar might have issues doing the same. Sometimes you refer to this as look down, shoot down capabilities. If you see first, you shoot first. The other component that matters here is electronic attack, or what we colloquially call jamming. If one side has the tools available to confuse the other side's sensors, while being able to protect its own sensors, like radars, from electronic attack, it is going to have a natural advantage. Again, I'll give you a simple analogy here. It is like fighting a blind man or fighting a man who is so drunk that he sees double. He doesn't know where you are. He doesn't know what he's doing because he's so drunk or he's blind. That is essentially what my jammers do to him. But you know exactly where he is, and you can plan your attack accordingly. So you could, in theory, bring the most powerful radars or the longest range missile to the battle. But if your enemy has more sophisticated electronic warfare, he can nullify or at least reduce their advantage. And the missile itself is very vulnerable to electronic warfare, more so than the fighter radar. But remember, a missile is essentially a small diameter object. That means it has a small radar and it is very limited in terms of what it can do. So it is relatively easier to either dazzle it so that it goes blind, or confuse it with decoys and false signals so that it goes after a false target and is essentially wasted. So to summarize, these are the main things that matter in a BVR engagement: the stated range of the missile, the overall situational awareness, the engagement geometry, and electronic warfare capabilities. These are the four main things, not the only things.
Okay. Great. I mean, Some time back, I did this small thread on Twitter on Meteor when Rafael had just come and I had spent a lot of time trying to talk about the ramjet engines, you know.
Mhm.
But since we have an expert online today, I want you to take some time and tell us why Meteor is such a big deal. Why is it considered a shot in the arm for IAF? Why everybody is assuming this is one missile which will solve a lot of our problems? Please take your time.
Yes, sir. So at the very beginning, I mentioned that using more sophisticated or more powerful propulsion will effectively give your missile increased range. The ramjet engine on the Meteor essentially does this. So unlike a conventional air-to-air missile, which has a rocket motor, this has a ramjet engine. So what does that? Let's talk about what that rocket motor does first. When a fighter pilot launches a missile, that rocket motor ignites. It powers the missiles for just a few seconds of its flight. It is not like one of those old video games where the missile is powered throughout its flight. No, it gives it enough power for a few seconds, and then the missile essentially just coasts to the target without any power. It uses the potential energy and kinetic energy that it has already built up, and it goes towards the target and attempts to hit it. What this means is, by the time that missile is close to the target, it has lost so much energy that it may not be able to maneuver hard enough to actually hit the target.
Is this, sorry to interrupt, but is this something that, people call the terminal phase, which is often spoken of as going pit bull? Can you explain that bit also?
Correct. So this is the terminal phase of the engagement. Now, I'm not sure what going pit bull exactly is. The USAF uses this terminology. I think it is when the
Okay.
seeker on the missile itself goes active to the point where the aircraft doesn't need to guide the missile in anymore. The missile is on its own. Fire and forget.
Or maybe it is beyond manipulation, like a
It's
pit bull
beyond
is so
manipulation.
focused. Yeah, it's going ahead now. Yeah.
Correct.
Sorry
Now,
to interrupt you. Go ahead.
the Meteor applies a different propulsion methodology to this. It has a ramjet engine, which means that it is powered for a longer duration of its flight. More power, more energy, better kinematics. Very simple. Increased range. That is very important. The other thing it can do is it can actually modulate the power output of that engine and essentially manage its energy better so that when it comes to this terminal phase of the engagement, it has more energy to maneuver hard and actually attempt to hit the target. The technical term for this is called having an expanded no escape zone. The no escape zone is this zone in which if you fire the missile at the enemy, there's a very small chance of it missing and a very high chance of it hitting the target. So what the ramjet engine does is it drastically expands this no escape zone. The other advantage is simply by being a new missile and newer technology, it has a better seeker. That radar seeker is more powerful. And not only is it more powerful, but it is also more resistant to electronic attack because the algorithms that are running in the backend, they are far more sophisticated than what you would find on, say, an R-77 missile. What this essentially means is, at this point in time, our enemies have nothing in their arsenal that can match up to the Meteor missile. One-on-one, it is the best missile in the Indian subcontinent at this point. But you also have to remember this. It is not a silvered bullet. We can spend all day discussing how cool the Meteor is and whatnot, but we have to understand that by virtue of its mere presence, it is not going to win an air battle. A host of factors will have to be brought together to create a favorable air situation. And that is the point where the Meteor's advantages can be used to good effect. It will not make up for bad planning. It will not make up for poor positioning of your own assets. It will not make up for deficiencies in other equipment either. You would still need to shape the battlefield so that it creates the conditions for victory. And that is about as much as I can add to this topic. Thank you, Manik.
Thanks a lot, Mihir. Thanks a lot. It was really informative, really eye-opening, and really interesting. I hope all the listeners also enjoyed to this. And we will continue calling Mihir for more air-related topics. But that's all we have for today. And thank you everyone for listening. Jai Hind.
Jai Hind.